While the world was distracted by interest rate rumors in New York, a bureaucrat in Beijing signed a document that barely made the back page of the financial gazettes, a tax cut, specifically an import tax reduction on high-tech medical equipment and advanced processors. On the surface, it looks like a trade concession, a handshake. But if you overlay this document with the satellite thermal imaging of Greenland from last week, the handshake turns into a stranglehold. Why would the world's factory, the dominant exporter, suddenly lower the drawbridge to frantically import high-tech hardware? Because they know the raw material to build them is about to disappear from the open market. We look at our screens, obsessed with the cloud, forgetting that the cloud is made of metal, specifically neodymium and dysprosium, the oxygen of artificial intelligence. And right now, the primary tank is being locked, and the backup tank is buried under 2 miles of ice in a territory that Washington is rapidly losing influence over. The headline says China is quietly tracking Greenland. They aren't tracking. They are waiting for the West to freeze to death so they can sell the firewood. Welcome to the choke point. Let's put 2 pieces of paper on the table and look at them until the contradiction starts to hurt. On the left, we have a report from the South China Morning Post, dated January 23rd. The headline reads, China to quietly track Greenland developments. The key phrase there is quietly track. It sounds passive. It sounds diplomatic. It sounds like a biologist observing a polar bear from a safe distance. It suggests patience and a long time horizon. Now, look at the document on the right. This is the official decree from Beijing, dated January 30th, just 1 week later. It is a directive to immediately slash import taxes on high-tech medical equipment and advanced, resource-intensive processors. Do not let the dry language of tax codes bore you, because this is where the smoking gun is hiding. This is not the behavior of a passive observer. This is the behavior of a quartermaster preparing for a siege. Think about the mechanics of the global economy for a second. China is the world's factory. The factory sells. The factory exports. Typically, a manufacturing powerhouse raises import tariffs to protect its domestic industries, to keep foreign competitors out. That is economics 101. But here we see the exact opposite. We see the reverse door paradox. By lowering the barrier to entry for these specific high-tech goods, Beijing is essentially turning its economy into a vacuum cleaner. They are trying to suck as much finished technology into the mainland as possible, and they are doing it fast. Why would the world's dominant supplier suddenly become a desperate buyer? Because they know something about the supply chain that the traders on Wall Street have not priced in yet. They know that the conveyor belt is about to stop. The narrative we are being fed is that this is just another chapter in the trade war, a diplomatic tussle between Washington and Beijing. But that is a distraction. This is not about tariffs. This is about physics. The connection between that tax cut and the ice sheets of Greenland is not political. It is chemical. We are living in a hallucination. We look at our screens, and we see the internet as this ethereal floating entity. We call it the cloud, as if it is made of water, vapor, and magic. We talk about artificial intelligence as if it is a pure spirit of logic, detached from the constraints of the material world. We obsess over the software, the algorithms, the large language models. But today, I am going to ask you to do something uncomfortable. I want you to look at the device you are watching this on, whether it is a smartphone or a laptop or a monitor. Don't look at the pixels. Look at the object. Feel the weight of it in your hand. That weight is not code. That weight is earth. It is glass. It is silicon. And most importantly, it is a very specific set of 17 magnetic elements that are currently being held hostage by a geopolitical standoff that most people cannot even find on a map. If you take away the software, what you are left with is a rock that has been tricked into thinking it is alive, and the supply of the specific type of rock required to keep this illusion going is running out. Most people prefer the comfortable lie. They want to believe that tech stocks only go up and that innovation can solve resource scarcity. If you are looking for that kind of reassurance, there are plenty of channels that will read press releases to you and tell you everything is fine. You should go watch them. But if you are the kind of person who suspects that the silence in the mainstream media is actually the loudest alarm bell, and if you want to understand the machinery that is grinding beneath your feet right now, then you are in the right place. We analyze the signal, not the noise. We need to stop thinking like economists and start thinking like surgeons. We need to cut open the chest cavity of the modern economy and see what is actually pumping the blood. The document from January 30th was not a tax policy. It was a triage order. Beijing is stockpiling the finished organs because they know the donor list is about to be closed. The article from January 23rd says they are tracking Greenland. They are not tracking it. They are targeting it because Greenland is the only other place on Earth that holds the periodic table elements necessary to keep the lights on in Silicon Valley. We are about to perform an autopsy on the AI revolution before it has even fully matured. And what we are going to find inside the body is not a computer chip, but a magnet. A tiny permanent magnet made of neodymium and dysprosium. Without it, the data centers overheat. The robots stop moving. The wind turbines stop spinning. And right now, the only country that knows how to refine it just locked the warehouse doors. So let's pick up the scalpel and see exactly how deep this dependency goes. Because the patient is already on the table and the oxygen levels are dropping. Let us perform the autopsy. To understand why a tax document in Beijing threatens the existence of a server farm in California, we need to stop looking at the stock price ticker and start looking at the bill of materials. We need to strip away the marketing veneer of the digital age. We are told that we live in the cloud. The metaphor itself is designed to make you think of something weightless and omnipresent, something that exists everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. But that is a lie. The cloud is not water vapor. It is a fortress of steel and concrete, filled with rows of humming black monoliths that consume enough electricity to power a small city. If we walk into one of these data centers and pull a single NVIDIA H100 GPU out of the rack, we are holding the physical heart of the artificial intelligence revolution. It is heavy. It is dense. And if we take a surgeon's scalpel to this unit and scrape away the plastic casing, the gold plating, and the silicon logic gates, we find the true source of its power. We find a magnet. This is where the anatomy of the crisis begins. It is not about the microchip itself, but about what keeps the microchip functioning. To run a large language model or a generative AI simulation, these chips generate an immense amount of heat. They require liquid cooling systems and high-velocity fans that spin at thousands of revolutions per minute without failing for years on end. To build a motor that efficient and that compact, you cannot use old-fashioned ferrite magnets. You need supermagnets. You need neodymium. This is the muscle of the modern world. Without neodymium, the hard drives in the cloud servers stop spinning. The cooling fans stop rotating. The robotic arms in the Tesla factories freeze in place. The guidance fins on advanced missiles lose their precision. Neodymium is not fuel. It is the structural integrity of motion itself. But there is a second layer to this biological dependency that is even more critical and terrifying. When you run these motors inside a server rack that is processing 1 trillion parameters, the temperature spikes. Normal magnets lose their magnetic field when they get hot. They demagnetize. If that happens, the cooling fails, and the AI literally melts down. To prevent this, engineers dope the neodymium with an even rarer element called dysprosium. Dysprosium is the heat shield. It allows the magnet to retain its soul at extreme temperatures. So when you ask ChatGPT a question, the answer is not coming from the ether. It is coming from a physical interaction between neodymium and dysprosium buried deep inside a machine. This is the oxygen supply. If you cut it off, the organism does not just get sick, it suffers immediate organ failure. Now we arrive at the choke point, and this is where the patient usually goes into cardiac arrest. You might point to a map and say that the United States has rare earth mines. You would be correct. The Mountain Pass mine in California is one of the largest in the world. But this is where the illusion of independence shatters. Mining the rock is the easy part. It is like drawing blood. The hard part is filtering it. Rare earth elements are chemically promiscuous. They cling to each other in the ore. Separating neodymium from praseodymium or dysprosium requires a complex, toxic, and incredibly precise chemical process called solvent extraction. It involves thousands of mixer settler tanks and creates lakes of radioactive slurry. It is dirty, dangerous, and technically exhausting work, and for the last 3 decades the West decided it was too messy to deal with. They outsourced the kidneys of the global economy to China. Today, China controls nearly 100% of the heavy rare earth refining capacity on the planet. Even the ore dug out of the ground in California at Mountain Pass has to be put on a ship and sent across the Pacific to China to be processed before it can be used to build a single F-35 fighter jet or a single AI processor. The West is digging up the blood, but they have to send it to Beijing for dialysis. If Beijing decides to turn off the dialysis machine, the patient dies within weeks. This is the vulnerability that the tax cut on January 30th exposes. By lowering import taxes on high-tech equipment, China is signaling that they are moving to the next phase. They are no longer interested in just being the kidney. They want to be the whole body. They are locking down the processing technology and hoarding the refined material. This brings us to the final piece of forensic evidence on our table. Greenland. Why is a frozen island with a population smaller than a football stadium the center of a quiet geopolitical war? Because the geology of Greenland contains the Kvanefjeld deposit. It is a geological anomaly. It is one of the few places on Earth outside of China that holds massive deposits of both neodymium and dysprosium in a chemical structure that is actually economically viable to refine. Greenland is the donor organ. It is the only backup kidney available that could theoretically allow the West to bypass China's monopoly. It is the emergency exit. When the headline says, China is quietly tracking Greenland developments, it means they are standing in front of that emergency exit with their arms crossed. They are not observing. They are ensuring that no one opens that door. They know that if the West can access and refine the resources in Greenland, the stranglehold is broken. But if they can use economic leverage, diplomatic pressure, or soft power to keep those resources in the ground or funnel them toward Chinese refineries, then the checkmate is complete. The anatomy of this crisis is clear. The AI revolution is built on a foundation of rare earth metals. The supply of those metals is controlled by a single competitor, and the only alternative source is currently drifting out of our geopolitical orbit. We have diagnosed the disease, and it is terminal unless a radical surgery is performed immediately. But you do not have to take my word for it based on geology alone. The financial markets, which are usually the last to react to physical realities, are finally starting to twitch. There is a specific anomaly in the price spread between the Shanghai Exchange and the Rotterdam spot market that has not happened since 2010. Now we place the stethoscope on the patient's chest and listen to the rhythm of the market. Because the charts are telling us that the system is already going into shock. To the untrained eye, a price chart is just a jagged line. But to a surgeon analyzing the anatomy of a supply chain, a divergence in price is a sign of a blockage in the artery. We are looking at a specific phenomenon called the pricing divergence. On one screen, we have the spot price for neodymium oxide at the BO2 rare earth exchange in inner China. The line is relatively flat. It is calm. It looks stable. But on the screen right next to it, we have the spot price for the exact same material delivered to Rotterdam or the west coast of the United States. That line is beginning to twitch. It is showing volatility. It is creeping upward. In a healthy circulatory system, arbitrage would fix this. Traders would buy the cheap material in China and sell it in Rotterdam until the price is equalized. That is how a free market body functions. But that is not happening here. The spread is widening. The gap between the Chinese price and the world price is the physical evidence of a firewall. The material is circulating internally within China, but it is struggling to cross the border. It is a blood clot. The organs on the outside, the factories in Germany, Japan, and America, are starting to pay a premium just to keep their blood flowing, while the organs on the inside get the material at a discount. This is not just a market fluctuation. This is a deliberate constricting of the vessels. We need to quantify exactly how much time the Western industrial body has before organ failure sets in. In the medical world, you check the blood bank reserves. In geopolitics, we check the strategic stockpiling ratio. This is a term that bureaucrats use to make themselves feel safe. But when you translate it into plain English, it simply means how many days can we survive if the ships stop coming. The Defense Logistics Agency, or DLA, is responsible for keeping the United States military ready for war. They are supposed to have mountains of this stuff, but if you dig into their unclassified inventory reports regarding dysprosium and high-grade neodymium magnets, the reality is terrifyingly thin. We are not talking about a 5-year buffer. We are talking about weeks for some specific alloy formulations required for advanced avionics and high-performance server cooling. The inventory is practically non-existent. We are running the entire U.S. tech sector on a just-in-time delivery model for a material that takes 15 years to bring online from a new mine. We are trying to run a marathon with a lung capacity of 30 seconds. If Beijing decides to close the port of Lianyungang tomorrow morning, the clock starts ticking immediately. This is not a slow decline. It is sudden cardiac arrest. This brings us back to the document signed on January 30th. We need to decode it properly. We are not just looking at a tax cut. We are looking at the harmonized system codes, or HS codes, listed in the appendix. These are the DNA markers of the trade world. The specific codes receiving the tax breaks are for advanced mining machinery and high-precision medical imaging technology. At first glance, this seems unrelated to rare earths. But think about the anatomy. Why would China want to import the world's best mining tech and medical scanners duty-free right now? Because they are preparing for total isolation. They are importing the technology they do not yet master, so they can reverse engineer it and build it themselves. They are closing the last loop. They are ensuring that once they cut the supply of rare earths to the West, and the West retaliates by cutting the supply of high-tech machinery to China, they will already have the machines they need inside their borders. It is a preemptive quarantine. They are vaccinating their economy against Western sanctions before they release the virus of a supply shock. The timing is surgical. You do not buy the ventilator unless you know the patient is about to stop breathing. There is a popular counter-argument floating around the comments sections and the op-ed pages of the Wall Street Journal. Experts love to say that the market will solve this. They say that if China restricts supply, the price will go up, and it will become profitable for American and Australian companies to open new mines. They point to projects in Texas or Wyoming and say we will just dig it up here. This sounds logical on paper, but it ignores the biological reality of time. It takes an average of 10 to 15 years to permit, build, and refine a rare earth mine in the West due to environmental regulations and technical complexity. 15 years. The AI revolution is happening next week. The H100 chips need to be cooled today. I want you to pause for a second and look at this timeline mismatch. We have a 15-year lag in supply and an immediate exponential explosion in demand. There is no mathematical way to bridge that gap without a massive crisis. So here is the question I want you to answer. I am looking for a sanity check from the people actually watching this. Do you believe that the bureaucracy of the West can suddenly speed up a 15-year process into 6 months to save the tech sector? Or do you believe that the strategic stockpile is actually empty and we are walking into a trap? Go down to the comments right now and type either bureaucracy if you trust the system to adapt, or trap if you think the data points to a shock. I want to see if I am the only one seeing this timeline fracture, or if you see it too. The scary part is not even the mine itself. It is the processing. Even if we opened the ground tomorrow, we do not have the separation tanks. We do not have the chemical engineers. We exported that expertise 20 years ago. Rebuilding it is like trying to learn how to perform brain surgery by reading a textbook while the patient is bleeding out. The divergence in price we are seeing on the screen is just the first tremor. The strategic stockpile is empty. The HS codes tell us the adversary is digging in. And the only backup plan the West has is sitting under the ice in Greenland. But as we pull the camera back from the microscope and look at the map, we realize that the infection has already spread far beyond the supply chain. It has entered the political bloodstream. The chessboard is larger than just rocks and chips. It involves nations, alliances, and a new axis of power that is quietly surrounding the Arctic while we are busy arguing about tax rates. The surgery is about to get much more complicated. We need to pull back the lens. If you only look at the mine, you miss the map. The crisis we have dissected in the lab, the shortage of the magnetic oxygen that keeps AI alive, is not an accident of nature. It is a feature of a new geopolitical architecture. We are witnessing the formation of a cold triangle in the North Atlantic. On one corner, you have Washington, which views Greenland primarily as a giant stationary aircraft carrier. The Thule Air Base is there to detect missiles, not to dig for dysprosium. On another corner, you have Copenhagen entangled in a complex web of European bureaucracy, trying to manage an island that is technically theirs, but increasingly autonomous in spirit. And on the third corner, watching from the shadows of the trade data we just analyzed, is Beijing. The headline, "Ottawa rethinks Beijing ties," is just diplomatic smoke. While Canada and the US are busy writing angry letters about spy balloons, China has been on the ground in nuke-shaking hands. They are not sending soldiers. They are sending engineers. They are offering to build airports, to expand harbors, to pave roads. In a place where infrastructure is scarce, concrete speaks louder than treaties. Washington offers protection. Beijing offers prosperity. And when you are a local government sitting on $1 trillion of untapped wealth, but you can't get it out of the ground because you lack the roads, protection feels theoretical, while prosperity feels urgent. This is the wedge. China is not buying the land. They are buying the logistics, but the ambition goes beyond the dirt. If we look at the melting ice sheet, we see the emergence of the Polar Silk Road. This is the geography of the future. As the Arctic warms, a new shipping lane opens up that bypasses the choke points of the Suez Canal and the Strait of Malacca. It is the shortcut of the century. Ships sailing from Shanghai to Rotterdam can shave weeks off their journey. And right in the middle of this new highway sits Greenland. Whoever controls the ports of Greenland controls the gas station of the new global trade route. This is why the tax cut on January 30th and the tracking of Greenland are connected. China is securing the raw materials for the ships and the robots that will ply this route, while simultaneously positioning itself to manage the route itself. It is a pincer movement. One arm tightens around the supply of rare earths essential for Western tech. The other arm reaches out to control the physical flow of goods across the top of the world. It is the Suez Crisis of the 21st century, but instead of sand, it is ice. And instead of oil, it is the building blocks of computation. Yet if you tune into the earnings calls coming out of Silicon Valley, the silence is deafening. The CEOs of the magnificent 7 tech companies are on stage talking about artificial general intelligence. They are promising a future where AI solves cancer, writes our novels, and drives our cars. They talk about trillions of dollars in value creation, but not one of them mentions the word Greenland. Not one of them admits that their entire roadmap is predicated on a stable supply of neodymium that is currently being fenced off by a strategic rival. Why the omission? Because to admit it is to admit that the emperor has no clothes. To tell shareholders that the cloud is vulnerable to a mine in the Arctic is to pop the valuation bubble. It is safer to pretend that supply chains are invisible and infinite. They are betting that the U.S. military will just figure it out. But the U.S. military is currently struggling to restock its own munitions, let alone secure a mining operation in a semi-autonomous territory. This is where it hits your wallet. You might not care about global shipping lanes or mining rights, but you care about inflation. When the supply of these magnetic elements contracts, the cost of everything that uses a motor or a chip goes up. We are not just talking about the price of a new iPhone. We are talking about the cost of the wind turbines that generate your electricity. When the turbine becomes 30% more expensive to build, your monthly utility bill goes up. We are talking about the electric vehicle in your driveway. We are talking about the MRI machine at your local hospital. If the input cost of the technology spikes because of a resource war, the consumer pays the price. It is a hidden tax levied by a foreign power through the mechanism of raw material control. The inflation of the future will not come from printing money. It will come from the scarcity of things. The BRICS nations understand this. They are pivoting to a resource-backed economy, while the West is still playing a debt-backed game. We are watching a slow-motion collision between a financialized world and a physical world. And usually physics wins. The trap has been set, the bait has been taken, and the door to the cage is slowly closing. The only question left is whether we are willing to see the bars before they lock into place. 2,000 years ago, the philosopher Plato described a cave where prisoners were chained, facing a blank stone wall from the moment of their birth. Behind them was a fire, and between the fire and their backs, puppeteers held up objects that cast shadows onto the wall. The prisoners, having never seen the outside world, believed that these dancing shadows were the only reality. They gave them names. They studied their movements. They bet on which shadow would appear next. Today, we are those prisoners. And the cave is the global financial market. We stare at our screens, watching the tickers flash green and red. We watch the price of NVIDIA. We read the press releases about ChatGPT-5. We obsess over the NASDAQ index. We think these things are the reality. We think value is generated by the code and the hype. But these are just shadows on the wall. They are two-dimensional projections of a three-dimensional world that most investors have completely forgotten exists. And the tragedy of the modern market is that we have become so entranced by the digital silhouette that we have forgotten to look at the fire that makes the projection possible. If you have the courage to turn your head and look behind you, the illusion dissolves. The fire that casts the shadow of the AI revolution is not algorithms or venture capital. It is the kiln. It is the smelter. It is the solvent extraction tank, bubbling with acid and rare earth ore. This is the kinetic reality. Without the fire of heavy industry, the shadow of the digital economy vanishes instantly. And standing between the fire and the wall is the puppeteer. For the last 30 years, the West has been content to sit and watch the wall, while outsourcing the job of the puppeteer to Beijing. We gave them the fire. We gave them the objects. We gave them the control. And on January 30th, with that tax decree regarding high-tech imports and the strategic tracking of Greenland, the puppeteer decided to change the show. They are stepping in front of the light. They are dimming the flame. When the tax cut was signed, it was the sound of the fire being damped down. The immediate future we are facing is not a market crash in the traditional sense. It is a reality crash. We are about to witness a supply shock that will shatter the assumption of infinite technological scaling. In the cave, we believe that if demand goes up, supply will magically appear to meet it. But in the real world of geology and physics, supply takes decades to build. The forecast is simple and brutal. We are moving from an era of abundance to an era of rationing. The price of GPS and advanced robotics will not rise because the technology is getting better. It will rise because the physical atoms required to build them are being hoarded. The inflation will not be monetary. It will be lithospheric. Greenland is no longer just an island of ice. In this new reality, it is the only window left in the cave. It is the only source of light that is not controlled by the adversary. This means the quiet diplomatic tracking will end. The Arctic will become a zone of intense militarization. It will not be peaceful. You do not leave the vault door to the Federal Reserve unguarded, and Kvanefjeld is the Federal Reserve of the 21st century. The silence of the Silicon Valley CEOs is the silence of men who know they are trapped in the cave, but are terrified to tell the other prisoners that the light is fading. They are hoping for a miracle. They are hoping for a breakthrough in material science that removes the need for neodymium. But hope is not a strategy. Physics is a strategy, and the physics are currently working against us. This is the verdict. The era of the cloud is over. We are entering the era of the ground. The valuations of companies that own intellectual property but lack physical supply chains will be corrected violently. The power is shifting from those who write the code to those who own the mine. We have spent decades building a digital castle on a foundation of sand, and now the tide is coming in. The paradox of the reverse door, where the exporter becomes the importer, was the warning signal. The divergence in pricing was the symptom, and the freezing of Greenland is the final diagnosis. The patient is critical. Most people who watch this video will go back to staring at the wall. They will check the stock price, and if it is green, they will feel safe. They will choose the comfort of the shadow over the blinding pain of the truth. But you are still here. You are listening to the end. That means that you are ready to stand up and walk out of the cave. It is a lonely journey. When you start seeing the world through the lens of resources and supply chains, rather than earnings, reports, and hype, you will feel isolated. You will see risks that your neighbors ignore. You will see scarcity where they see abundance. But this isolation is the price of clarity. We are building a network of people who refuse to be prisoners. We are mapping the exits. We are tracking the movement of the fire, not the movement of the shadow. If you want to be part of this intelligence briefing, if you want to understand the moves on the chessboard before they hit the headlines, then you know what to do. Share this investigation with one other person who you think is ready to wake up. Do not let them sleep through the alarm. The system relies on your ignorance to function. Break the chain. In the digital age, the one who holds the dirt is the true king. Elias Thorne, over and out.